Wiggle. I say wiggle to you, and I say wiggle to me, and I say wiggle to everyone. Wiggle. You must wiggle to viggle. And if you don't wiggle, then you're just, well, you're in a pickle. Hey, how you doing? Today I'm going to be talking about some spiritual stuff, as is my typical want. And, you may be thinking, oh, hey, are you going to continue on from where you were in the Red Main Castle with all these boys doing horrible war things because war? What is it good for? Absolutely nothing, unless you're a gigantic red man. Which I guess applies to most of the followers of Korn. But, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go over here because I decided that I am going to do a quest. I'm going to do one of the quests for the NPCs in this game that I think is kind of a cutie, and you can do good things for him. So why not? Why not do good things? Something that I find kind of interesting within the Bhagavad Gita is that, everybody, well, okay, actually I'm within the Mahabharata rather than specifically the Gita. The Mahabharata, is the greater epic surrounding the Bhagavad Gita, in case you don't know. Something that's very interesting is that there is a part within the Mahabharata where Krishna talks to the I guess he didn't notice me? Interesting. You noticed me. But he was talking to the main villain. And he talks to him and he says, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And you shouldn't be doing it. And he wants to teach him, the right way to live and everything. And because one of the things is, well, Krishna teaches the Gita to Arjuna, and everyone's like, well, why doesn't he teach it to the bad guy? Shouldn't the bad guy be taught what's right and wrong? But the thing that's very funny about this is that the villain in the Mahabharata, or at least one of the villains, the one that Krishna talks to here, he actually acknowledges that what he's doing is wrong. He acknowledges that I think all of these are going to kill him in like one hit, so I'm just going to unequip all of them so I can just punch. But one of the things that's interesting is that he tells the villain, hey, what? There we go. What'd you go and do? Some clod turned me into. You were just. Yeah, he got turned into a tree. But the villain, after he gets told by Krishna, like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. You shouldn't. He acknowledges that what he's doing is wrong. And, then Krishna says, well, then why don't you do the right thing? He says, well, I don't really feel like it. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't like try to come up with some big fancy reason that he can't do it or some philosophical reason. No. He just straight up says, I don't feel like it. This is a very honest answer and kind of an interesting one. Because you see, I think a lot of the difficulty for a lot of people when they're doing spirituality, when they're walking the spiritual path, is that they just don't really feel like doing the right thing. They just don't really feel like, being good or, following the right path. What they really feel like doing is just doing what they're already doing. They don't feel like renouncing things. They feel like everything, why not just do the bad things? But then there's also other people who recognize that what they're doing is bad. And what they come to understand is that, okay, they recognize that what they're doing is bad, and they want to stop, but the difficulty is that they just... Okay, I gotta stop. aiming like that because that's not helping me. But they realize that they can't stop. Like they say, oh, like I have this habit and it's bad and I just cannot for the life of me stop it. There was a time in my life where I had certain habits that I didn't want to keep doing, but I kept doing them because on some level, uh, even though I recognized that they were bad for me, maybe bad for my spirituality, bad for whatever, it was difficult to stop them. It's often that we feel these two different pulls, right? We feel the pull of what is righteous and what is good, but we also feel the pull of bad things like short-term pleasures. We feel I'm having a devil of a time. Okay, there you go. We feel the pull of doing that which is expedient, or maybe like that which is bad because it feels more pleasurable in the short term. That's often one of the biggest things. Is that it's not even that doing good doesn't feel pleasurable in some sense. It's just that in the short term, doing the right thing is often slightly more difficult. And in a lot of cases, we make excuses, right? Like, oh, I'm just too busy to go to temple. Going to temple isn't really like the best thing ever, but if you're trying to gain on the spiritual path, it's a good place to go. A good place to go is spiritual centers. I don't feel like going to the mosque. I don't feel like going here or there. And if you really think that's going to help you, then it is always a question. Well, why don't you want to go? And there's the poles of the different things. And there are some people for which doing the quote-unquote right thing is surprisingly easy, but often I've found that when I interrogate things that they are doing that they find so easy to do, a lot of times it's not even for the right reasons. Oh, hey, little bud. No, I won't. I am far superior to you in combat. So don't worry about that. But, and sometimes, there's just like that little part of us that just wants to do the bad thing. We find it's nice. Like, oh, wait, sorry, I get distracted by the little man talking to me. But some people, they do the right thing, but if you really examine their reasons for doing the right thing, they're not doing it for the right reasons. Some people will do spiritual things or like good things not so much because it's the right thing to do, but because they want recognition for it. Lord Jesus Christ often talks about the Pharisees. Like, what do the Pharisees like to do? The Pharisees like to go and they like to pray in front of everybody. They want to make sure that everyone sees them praying, that everyone sees that they're doing the quote unquote right thing, they're doing the righteous thing, they're saying their prayers. So there's that aspect to it too. It's also that in many cases doing the quote unquote right thing, or the thing that we might think is right, like following, maybe we believe that rituals are the right thing to do in most cases, but perhaps following a ritual at a specific time won't actually be good for us. It'll, like following certain rituals too strictly will actually be more of a problem because, like, hey, proper ritual for so and so to enter this temple, like, might be long and extensive, and they're like impure, like by our standards or something like that. And maybe for certain Hindu temples or certain other places. But if that person is in desperate need of help, then simply telling them no, you can't. You can't come You can't you can't come into this temple because you're not like in the right state of purity, and it's like they'll leave them to bleed out outside, and it's like I understand maintaining purity might be a good thing, but not every single ritual needs to be kept, and there's often a balance that needs to be struck. Now, part of the reason I wanted to mention all of that is because I keep saying the right thing, and I'm thinking in terms of we're just talking about general morality. The interesting thing about morality when it comes to spirituality in particular is that we often have this idea that we're trying to live a good life because it's a good life to live. And sure, that is true on some level. But in true spiritual discipline, we're not living a good life because it's the quote unquote right thing. We're not living it because it's a quote unquote moral life. We can say it's a moral life, and if we're talking to people who aren't on a spiritual path, we might say, oh, well, I think this is more moral than if we just, you know, didn't do it, or if we did the opposite of it, or, like I think the XYZ. But that's not the real reason we do moral, quote unquote, moral and good actions on the spiritual path. On the spiritual path, the real reason we're trying to do good actions is, in some sense, kind of selfish. We're trying to get to a point where we are more advanced spiritually. You do good things because that's what God wants you to do. And they're not good necessarily because they're strictly moral, but you do certain things because you believe these are the things that God wants you to do. You don't follow the rituals because the rituals are quote unquote innately good. You do rituals because you believe they will advance you further along your spiritual path. You do good because you're trying to get closer to God and please God, or you're trying to, become more enlightened. You're trying to live a better life. But you don't just do these things strictly because they're quote unquote moral. Putting all these ideas into moral and immoral is actually very dangerous. Because the truth is that there are numerous different spiritual paths, and some of which might even have conflict in what they presume is moral or immoral. Like in Islam, like it would be considered, or what I should say, not moral and immoral, but right and wrong. Like in Islam, it would be wrong for a Muslim to consume pork. Pork is forbidden by God. If you're trying to get closer to God, you wouldn't consume pork. If you're trying to follow, that version of Islam, that in the Quran, if you're trying to follow the Quran, you would not consume pork. But for just say some average Christian in the United States or elsewhere, consuming pork is not a morally charged activity. There are a lot of activities like that we kind of like morally charge because of what we're doing and what we're not, or like what we're doing and what we think that other people should be doing. For instance, Muslims don't want to eat pork. Sometimes you'll see groups of Muslims in certain countries who are not primarily Islamic countries trying to banish pork. But like, if you really stop and think about that, if that's not part of the covenant, if that's not part of the religion that these people are following, then it doesn't really matter to them. It's not a morally charged activity. But the thing is, we tend to charge things that we do and we think are right with these morally like loaded words and loaded terms. We think about right and wrong, good and bad, and things like that. But in truth, most of these things are kind of empty. Well, I mean, everything is empty in a sense, but also everything is full. It's kind of an interesting little dichotomy, and I'll get into that at some point. Probably make a video about that. Um, but they're morally empty by themselves. It is us who gives them their actions and or their meaning and purpose. It is us who, you know, assigns certain meanings and things to uh, the great, to our little actions, like especially greater meanings. there's nothing wrong with trying to say that you want to live a quote unquote moral life, but what you should always remember is that it can be kind of dangerous when you assign everything to morality rather than your own personal journey with God, your own personal desire. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get closer to God. You're trying to get closer to an enlightened life. You're trying to improve, and you're trying to bring yourself with faith and devotion or with knowledge or whatever path you're on closer to that divinity, right? So when you sit there and morally charge your words and your ideas, you're basically priming yourself to get into conflict with other people whose paths can be different from yours. So what I'm suggesting is don't morally charge every activity you do, spiritually or otherwise. What you should do instead is find the activities and the things that bring you personally closer to God. Find um, the rituals that work for you. Find things that help you purify yourself and help you feel closer to God. And don't
Wait, you got it.
and don't worry so much about like the individual uh what other individuals are doing.
Arranged my mum was, and that sewing kit was all I always wanted. Then I.
That you cannot just curl up and die. I require you to make outfits. But that's what that's what you really gotta think about. You gotta think about things from that perspective. You know, Sri Ramakrishna, he talked about all of the different paths that people could embark on. And within my father's house there are many doors, Jesus. And I think we really do need to be careful about this. I've seen so many people get into these tremendous conflicts over terribly minor things or things that are really just down to ritual when in truth uh, God is prevalent in all things and in even crazy rituals that we don't understand. And as long as people are not getting hurt, we shouldn't be talking about moral and immoral, right and wrong. There's a lot of it that is just preference and culture and all that. And you got to think, eventually we might go out into the stars and meet other civilizations. Maybe. It's a possibility. And, just because their rituals are going to be different than ours and maybe will strike us as strange and things like that, it doesn't mean that they're going to be right or wrong. It just means that they're going to be different. And the wonderful thing about the Divine Mother is that she has given us so many wonderful ways to worship in so many varieties of ways and so many different religions, and we can all find paths that soothe our souls and bring us closer to God. We don't need to worry too much about what other people are doing. Not a mean Jimmy Dean. Ow. Unless they try to stomp on you like that. If they try to stomp on you like that, I would maybe worry a little bit more about what they're doing. But that's more of a stomping on you issue rather than a scratch head. Rather than any other kind of issue. But I just wanted to share those thoughts with you guys. Try not to morally charge all your actions, but try to remember that you're trying to do the thing that you think is most pleasing to God or is the best for you to move on. You're trying to think about the end results, not just what, not just quote unquote right or wrong. It's not about that. You're trying to think about doing the things that bring the most pleasure and benefit to the world and help people as much as they possibly can in the long run. And sometimes you're going to be doing things that are for the short term as well, and it's Not like either or is wrong. It's just different perspectives and different ways to think about it. Okie dokie, artichoke. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope you maybe got a little something out of me talking. All right, have a great one. Bye-bye.